Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'm Claire Jones. If we haven't already met, I'm an author and small publisher committed to changing the world for the better through inclusive stories and practices. And we are jumping on today for my Authorvision Facebook Live series, where I interview the amazing and inspiring authors in my network to discuss the personal visions that have shaped our lives and careers. So if you're joining us, please like, comment, share below. Let us know that you're here. And today I'm talking to Brandi. I'm so glad to have you here.
Hi.
Yeah, we met at Geek Girl Con. Yeah, is that where we
Yes.
met?
Mhm.
Amazing event. Highly recommended. I mean, it was a little slow when we were there, but I'm encouraging more people. So let's join right into it. Tell me your backstory. How did you get to where you are today?
That's a very long story. Um, because I definitely ping-ponged a lot trying to figure out who I was, where my place was in started off going to school. I went to Western and got my degree in sociology. I thought I was going to go into like the FBI and be a profiler.
Mm, mm.
That was that turned out to not be the career path for me. Um, Ended up then kind of doing some odd jobs trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And thought, oh, I know, I really love beauty and art, and I would love to go to cosmetology school. So I went to cosmetology school, got my license, became a hairstylist. Um, and as much as I love the craft, the salon environment is not for me.
Mm.
It's very much like high school. And as somebody who wasn't very particularly fond of high school, in fact, I did Running Start partly to get high school credits, but partly because I didn't have to attend high school classes and have the social aspect. Picking an environment or a career where the social aspect is very much like high schoolers was just not a great move.
Mm.
Um, and then and even as I was starting to figure that out, I developed carpal tunnel. So that was
Yeah, that's very common.
yes. So that not a great career choice for me there. So then I've just kind of as I have had children now, um, after my first son was born, uh, obviously you go on maternity leave for a while, you're not working. And that actually gave me some clarity for a little while to kind of really think about like, man, what am I dying to do right now? Like if I weren't home with my kid, what would I really want to do right now?
Mm.
Um, and I realized that like what I really wanted was to tell stories. And I have had these stories in my head since I was a teenager, just kind of floating
Mm.
around there. And I just kind of let them just live in my daydreams by myself,
Sure.
just for me. Um, and it was as, you know, having a kid and whatnot and being home alone, I thought, I really want to share these stories because they're fun. And they're not when people think of daydreams, they think of like, oh, you think of dream of yourself like, I don't know, on a date with a celebrity or something. It's not
Sure.
those kinds of daydreams. Like I would have full cinematic stories, epic adventures in my head. And I thought,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, this is not something that should be just for me. This is something that I need to share.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think sociology is a great foundation for that, isn't it? Because it's the study of
Yes.
culture and people. And like, go thinking about going into the FBI, like that is such a great backstory for an author. Especially if you're in the like thriller and mystery genres, but I know you're more fantasy oriented, yeah.
Fantasy romance actually, which is so far from my when I first fell in love with reading, I did fall in love with mysteries.
Hmm.
Um and it's as I got older that I discovered romance was like, oh no, this is my genre.
Yeah, yeah.
um but yes, it is helpful in that part of what I studied, because you have to pick disciplines at Western when you go into sociology. And so my disciplines were criminology. And then my other disciplines, because you have to pick two, was family studies. So we learned a lot about marriage and societal norms and how how trends form and what factors affect relationships. And so that actually has been super helpful when I'm writing romance, because
Yeah.
I know from statistical perspective, like, okay, what monkey wrenches can I throw in this relationship? Like,
Yes.
ooh, okay, if I give these two an age gap, this is what it's going to do to their relationship. If I put them from different cultures, is what it's going to do. So, having that little bit of background to know, okay, I can give them these kind of things that mismatch, but then also knowing where my limit is, because
Hmm.
kind of understanding the dynamics of, you can go this far with it, but at a certain point, if there's too many uh, breaking factors in a relationship, it's not going to work. You can
Yeah.
only have
Yeah.
so many. You can have cross culture and maybe different religions and an age gap, and there's different things you can add in, but at a certain point, if you have too many of them, then it's like,
Right.
maybe this is not meant to be. So
Right.
kind of knowing, okay, it's like, what are we going to explore, what are we not going to explore here, and kind of
Yeah.
being able to combine those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna have to pause for a second. I should have done this before we went live, but the battery's running out
Oh.
on this laptop. So I'm gonna go grab the charger cord and be right back.
All right.
All right, there we go. So I wanted to say that I actually took a sociology class in college as well. And that's actually where I learned more about sexual expression, honestly,
Hmm.
because I did a huge report on the Kinsey report. I don't know if you ever studied him.
Yes, one of my classes that I took was literally titled Sociology of Sexuality. So like the
Yes.
entire quarter, the whole class was literally just covering the concepts of sexuality and like
Yeah.
sexual expression and gender expression, and like where they differ and where they overlap. And just that class was amazing. It was very eye-opening, learning just all of the different expressions there are. And not only that, but it was just really, for me, because I came from a very conservative background. So
Mm,
going into that class, um, there was just so much that, even growing up in a liberal area, by having that more conservative background, I wasn't quite as aware.
mm.
And there are things that I learned in that class that now are kind of hitting mainstream consciousness,
Sure.
that it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting watching other people start to play catch up now. There, it's like, well, yeah, I
Absolutely.
remember learning that in college. Everyone thinks it's a new thing. And I'm like, no, scientists have known about this for years,
Yeah.
like decades.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
We may not know, but they know.
Yeah. If you ever want to get your mind blown about like what the 1960s were like, study Kinsey. Like I talk about Kinsey on so many first dates.
So he is really fascinating because, of course, like he was like the pioneer of the whole study. So we definitely covered Kinsey, but it was really interesting in that we looked at him from a perspective of, like, he was definitely a pioneer, and he brought a lot of ideas to the forefront that people needed to study, and the concept that we need to study them. Um, but unfortunately, his methodology was pretty flawed,
Yeah,
and so there's a lot of statistics that have come out of his stuff that it's like, you can use his concepts, but
sure.
like, don't use his statistics.
Absolutely.
Because people will continue to use some of them. They're like, yeah, that's not actually how that works, because he didn't use correct methodology, and that's not
Yeah.
actually how you measure these things. But
Yeah.
he, again, he was blazing a new trail. So I don't think at the time he realized that
Yeah.
I don't think he was doing it to trick people or to anything like that. It's just,
Sure.
the field was fairly newish at the
Yeah.
time, and so
Yeah. There
yeah.
was no standard for him to follow. There was no
Right.
protocol for him to follow. He was kind of like, here's some things I've learned.
Yeah.
So what kept you going along the way? Like what was that that vision or that goal that you had that was your North Star for this journey?
So For me, it wasn't even so much that I was actively keeping it in mind as much as like it wouldn't leave me alone.
Yeah, I feel that.
So, it was one of those. I remember back in, gosh, I would have been probably junior, sophomore in high school or something. Very young, probably about 16 years old. And my mom, having read some of my short stories and stuff, 'cause we did creative writing in school, like, you should be an author. You're really good.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to be an author. They don't make any money. And not that I want to be rich, but I was just like, I know they literally make nothing.
Hmm.
um, so I was like, I have to make a living doing something else. And then kind of ending up eventually after years coming full circle. My mom was right. I can't help myself. I really like it. Just this drive to put these stories out there is just, it's not going to go away. It doesn't matter what other careers I try. This is what is still just sticking to me.
Yeah, yeah. I was laughing earlier when you said these like daydreams that you have in your brain that are like fully fleshed out. I call them AUs, alternative universes, that
Mhm.
just like exist in my brain. Like I've got probably 6 to 10 different AUs in my brain at any given time. And depending on the mood I'm in, I'll like, station myself in that AU and be like, let's imagine some more.
Well, and the funny thing about the daydreams too is like these fully fleshed out daydreams that I have, I'm not the protagonist in them. It's not a first person point of view. I'm seeing it from the point of view of all these different characters that in my head they're so real in my head. I know they're not real people. I'm not I'm not that kind of mentally ill. But but in my head they are so fleshed out that like when I go to write their stories, there's very much that sense of like if people, oh, just make your character do this. And I'm like, but they wouldn't. That's not them. That's not how they work.
Yeah.
That they're very much, and it's funny because people talk about, having to fill out um, forms and stuff for their
Mhm.
character and having to
Sure.
write down, their background and all this stuff to try to flesh out their characters. Like, no, my characters come to me fleshed out, and it's my job to figure out how to make them get into a cohesive plot together.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so funny. I mean, it's so different when you're writing fiction versus nonfiction too, when it comes to this. But I tell nonfiction writers as well, like you have to have some level of characterization in the story that you're telling. Because if you don't have any type of personas for the reader to get to know, to compare and contrast themselves against, or even see the like narrative arc of what they're learning over the course of whatever you're teaching in this nonfiction book, right? You have to have some sort of characterization because that's how human brains work, you know? Like we relate to characters and we understand stories so much better when we have those characters in the story to help us understand the context of what we're absorbing.
Oh yeah, I mean that's especially when comparing it to, I would say, like with fiction writing. So much of fiction writing, you are teaching something. It's just a totally
Yes,
different way than the nonfiction. I mean,
absolutely.
if you think about, everyone who's seen Star Wars or read a Star Wars book, everyone knows the Empire's evil.
Mm,
But like, if you were to try to write a nonfiction paper on just, imperialism is bad, well, if
yeah,
you know, they'll gloss over it. But you get
absolutely.
some kind of narrative in there. I mean, yes, with nonfiction generally, you don't go that extreme because you're
Yeah,
writing
yeah.
real things, but they can both be teaching things. It's kind of cool how there is that area where they overlap more than people think.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And it is true that those characters don't leave us alone sometimes. Like I was in a podcast interview month ago, 2 months ago, where they asked me out of the two novels that I've published, who's my favorite character. And I was like, actually, my favorite character is one that I haven't even written yet. Like, we're not even going to be introduced to him until book four. Like, but I spend so much time with him in my head.
Oh yeah, I've got well, I wrote my first two in my Healer's Kiss series, from writing about Kennard and Odelia, and Kennard's sister, Kenora, would not shut up.
Mm.
He just was like, I want, I have a story. I have a really good story. And so I actually haven't done book 3 of that trilogy yet. I still, because I did sidetracked and did Kenora's story because she just would not leave me alone. It was like every time I would try to get into the other story, she was like, no, I'm not waiting anymore. I have a story and I need to get it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. We have many conversations throughout the day, both with ourselves and our characters. So, what lessons did you learn throughout this process? What were the big takeaways for you?
So one of the lessons I learned is that yeah, your pen name is important.
Mm,
Um, learned that lesson the hard way. Um, so my married name is Brandi Spencer,
mm,
but my maiden name is Brandi Marine.
mm,
And it's a cool last name. It
mm.
it was one of those where like when I got married, there's a little party. I'm kind of disappointed to leave that name
Yeah,
behind. It was
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but I thought, okay, I'll write under that name, so at least it still gets some usage.
Mm,
Um, and while I was at it, I don't know. There's an authory thing where we like to use initials sometimes. I don't know
mm.
why we're drawn to it. I think
Yeah,
it's because I think I think C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien kind of like started that trend with
yeah,
fantasy writers, and we're just like,
yeah,
oh, we use initials.
yeah.
So I wrote under B.C. Marine, which yes, that was technically my name at one point in time, but like it sounds fake. And unfortunately, on Amazon, I could not find myself on Amazon when I would search for my books.
Mm,
When I first put them out under that pen name, because when you search BC Marine, even though I initially thought of it as that's my name, that's not what the algorithm saw.
yeah,
So if you search for me, you would either get military stuff or Canadian boating,
great.
because
Yeah.
they would assume that BC was British Columbia. And I actually got emails from like a marina in British Columbia that would
Oh,
send me like asking questions about like my marina or what. I'm like, I'm not a marina. I'm not. I have nothing to do with boats.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah. So unfortunately, I kind of reached a point where like I'd published my first 2 books under that name. I was like, okay, do I keep going with this because I've already established it,
Mm,
or do I backtrack and just start over? Because
mm,
you kind of have to weigh, obviously, if anyone who's read my books under the first pen name is then yeah, there's a potential I've probably lost some people switching over.
sure.
Um, but on the other hand, it's like, okay, but if I'm never going to get traction with this name, the longer I keep going down this path, the harder it's going to be to turn around.
Man, I really want to highlight that because I'm a fan of quitting. Like, there's so many people out there that are like, don't quit, keep going. And I'm like, sometimes quitting is the smart choice.
Yeah,
You know, sometimes you're looking at the brutal facts of reality in front of you. Like when I search my author name, all I get is Canadian Marinas. And then you're like, well, I need to change something instead of trying to push against this immovable force that exists out there.
yeah. Um, well, and it's funny too because like one of the aspects was like, well, M comes before S in the alphabet, so ooh, my maiden name would be further on the shelf because I came from a background where for a short while I worked at a bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
and books are listed alphabetically. So if your name is higher in the alphabet, your book is going to be more prominently placed. Just it's not to short anybody. That's just how the alphabet works. And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, okay, I want that higher alphabet number. It's like nobody that's not how people search books anymore.
Yeah.
It's
No.
you got to go with what the algorithm is going to find because they don't
Yeah.
list them alphabetically on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, no, forget it. Forget everything you knew. This is not how things actually work.
Yeah. So I actually have a funny story about my name as well, because there's a lot of Claire Joneses out there. Like there are thousands of us out there. And when you specifically search Claire E. Jones, before I intentionally created my digital presence, there were 2 famous Claire E. Joneses out there. One was the royal harpist for the British royal family, and the other was a porn star.
Oh, fun.
And so a lot of people think that my name is also a fake name, but it's also a good author name because it is simple, one syllable. Jones is very easy to remember, that kind of stuff. And so you kind of do have to look at your name with a different lens when you are choosing what your pen name is going to be. And luckily, I've been in business long enough that I have pretty much dominated the first page of Google with Claire Jones. So I was at a pretty good spot starting out with that, but yeah, you really do have to consider that stuff going into it.
Oh yeah. Um, well, and it's funny too because for a while there, like I said, I was using the initials, and it's like I'm writing romance, and it's like because I got made fun of in school for my name because
Mm,
brandy is an alcoholic beverage and kids are
mm,
cruel. And so I kind of had a little bit of a complex about my name too. And so I think a little bit of me was hiding that and kind of coming to terms with the fact that like I was just bullied in general in school, and the name was not the problem. It doesn't
mm,
matter what my name is; they would have
mm.
found something about
Yeah,
me to pick
yeah,
on me for.
exactly.
So, looking at it, trying to look at it objectively, it's like, you know what? Actually, Brandy is not a bad name for a romance writer. Like, it
Absolutely.
really isn't.
Yeah.
So, kind of just accepting it. You know what? No, I'm not going to hate myself for my name. I'm just going to put my legal name out there. We're just going to go with it because,
Hmm.
kind of just really owning where I where I am in this space and be like, yeah, you know what? I write romance. That's what I write. I'm not
Absolutely.
going to be embarrassed about that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, what tools or practices did you use to keep yourself going through this? Like, what was that support system that you had to create for yourself?
So for me, a lot of it comes down to the fact that I am in a publishing co-op that I founded with two other women.
All right. Yeah.
That we met online, kind of became friends in this writers group, and after a while, kind of got to talking about like, gee, like these big publishers, you lose so much creativity with them, but then self-publishing is so hard and, trying like, well, what if we could share the burden a little bit? And so
Hmm.
ended up creating a little authors co-op with the three of us. And we've got more people in it now. But as one of the founding members of the co-op, I've got a lot of responsibilities and stuff. I'm the secretary treasurer.
Hmm.
Um, so because I have these responsibilities, when I have my little low moments where I'm like, oh, what am I doing? No one wants to read my books. Why am I doing this? There's at least some obligation there to keep going a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which isn't to say that like, oh, if it wasn't for the co-op, I would have given up completely. But it's nice to have that little push when you have low moments because
Yeah.
I think we all as authors have our low moments because
Oh,
it's
yeah. Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know yeah.
Yeah, you have to have both the internal and the external motivations because chances are one of those are going to fail at some point in time. Either
Mhm.
external motivations go away or the internal motivations go on vacation. And so you have to have like I kind of call it manipulating the creative flow sometimes is like you kind of have to create these support structures for yourself that you can rely on when things do go sideways because you have to plan for things to go sideways. Like plans do not go according to plan. So you have to have like extra support structures built into it so that you can have things supporting you when the other supports fail.
Oh yeah, and especially like I said, so I'm treasurer in my in my co-op. So like I see all the numbers that come in from distributors and whatnot, so that I can just distribute things out. And so like, oh, if you are doing the worst that month, it's rough. It is
Mhm.
not fun to look at because there's no getting away from it. I cannot escape the responsibility I have to do that job, and so I can't just plug my ears, go nope, nope, oh, I'm not gonna look at my numbers.
Yeah.
Um, so I have to see them. And so yeah, that can be really, really rough.
Mhm.
And so, having to kind of get past that and go, okay, that month was terrible. That's okay. What are we going to do about it now?
Yeah.
And kind of having to be able to move forward and look at it from a perspective of, okay, do I need to change something? Were there circumstances that month? What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's that critical thinking aspect too, which I think is one of those things when we do take these humanity-based education programs is like we learn to look at information as with a critical eye. Like,
Hmm.
what does this mean and what can I do moving forward? It's like facts over feelings. I've heard that phrase before of being like, all right, let's look at the brutal facts of reality and do something about it instead of just being mired in the self-doubt and, being depressed on the couch for a week.
Yeah. And I mean, I still end up there sometimes
Oh
just
yeah.
because I've got, I'm open about I have clinical depression. So like, sometimes no matter how hard I work to motivate and stuff, sometimes it just gets the better of me. And, it,
Yeah.
understanding that it's like, okay, that's not a reflection of my authorship. That is my mental health. And that's a separate, I mean, they're obviously they affect each other and are intertwined, but the one, it doesn't define the other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going through a mild depressive episode at the moment too. And I have to like balance my couch days and my get shit done days.
Yep, definitely. There are times too where you go, okay, you know what? I know I'm supposed to be productive, but I'm gonna give myself a day. I'm gonna sit on the couch and read a book or play a video game or something, and I'm going to just let myself just chill with this for a little bit.
I mean, sometimes the definition of productive is being unproductive.
Hmm.
Like you need both in order to perform at your best when you do get asked to perform.
Yeah, and especially with such a creative field too, like there is such a thing as like creative burnout, where like you've made too many things, you need to stop and consume other creative content.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I think is honestly the root of writer's block is a lack of inspiration.
Hmm.
And so when people do experience writer's block, I'm like, go out and do something else. Like, don't bang your head against the keyboard and shame yourself for having writer's block. Like, go gardening, go for a walk, go watch a TV show, go talk to a friend. Like, you need to vary that in order to get those juices flowing.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to add before we start wrapping up?
Um, I don't think so. I think we actually kind of covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I always love these conversations. They're like mini therapy sessions sometimes too. Just it's like camaraderie.
Oh, speaking of therapy sessions, actually, I found my last book I wrote was very therapeutic for me.
Mm,
Um, because I made the main character, I don't say it in the story, but I do have an author's note afterward explaining that she is ADHD and autistic.
mm,
Which is not something you see a lot in romance.
very
It's
true.
usually something that people are like, oh no, we don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole, especially because of how it's been portrayed in so much media.
True.
There's definitely like an infantilization there.
Oh yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and so, this concept that like, no, she can still be an adult and still have agency, even though she does perceive the world a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And so in her particular case, it comes along with the ability to speak to animals. And so it's not that she's autistic because she speaks to animals, and more like that she ended up with that particular gift because she was already inclined that way. So like for her, she's very much there's a lot of sensory things. Everything is just too much.
Mm,
So much sensory input and things like that. So that's kind of the guiding thing. Like when she first meets the hero, and he goes to like hold her hand, and like her initial reaction is to like shy away,
mm,
not because she's not into him, because she's really into him, but just because she has so much sensory input, and everything is so much for her that it's just it's like, natural reaction to just pull back from things. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
kind of exploring that concept and being able to just write in her point of view and not feel like I had to make everything perfect and in order, because like, no,
Mhm.
that's not how her brain works. She's going to go down little rabbit trails sometimes, and you're just going to have to kind of follow her there a little bit.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Love
so
that.
yeah, she was very freeing to write. So
Mhm.
that was a lot of fun. And then on by contrast, the hero, he comes from a very they they're a little bit based off like Greek and Roman. So like he's a
Mhm.
very sexually open and very aggressive society. And so he was kind of a fun character to write, in that like the guy has like no inhibitions. Like
Mhm.
he does not like he doesn't use euphemisms or anything. Like everything is just
Mhm.
very straightforward. And so it was just they were just so much fun to write because they're really so much outside the boundaries of like
Mhm.
usual kind of characters that
I
you
love
see.
that. I mean, that's honestly one of my raison d'etres when it comes to writing fantasy romances. Diverse characters. Let's have a round of applause for diverse characters, because we've had enough, white, cisgendered, heteronormative bodice rippers.
Yeah, I mean, and it's yeah, I have the two main characters are, but like they don't. There are other characters who are not, and like so like the main hero, like I made his best friend bi,
Hmm.
and it was just like, yeah, we're not compatible with each other. I know that's whatever, but you're still my best friend. Like it's just so yeah, and they have their moments where they clash, and they're like, whatever.
Hmm.
Sometimes we're just terrible to each other because that's just what friends do sometimes.
Hmm.
And so just the very and kind of having fun with her in that she comes from a much more repressed background, and so
Hmm.
having her kind of experience this world all for the first time while also not being super judgy about it.
Hmm.
Because usually it's like, oh, if you read the character from the conservative background, they're gonna be like instantly judging everyone and how dare they be like this. Where she's like, wow, okay, that's way different from where I grew up, but okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Let's just go with it. I'm not,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Oh, I love it.
it is very fun to write them in a different way. Um,
Yes.
so
Yes.
because it was one of those things where I was like, okay, it's sexually permissive society. I understand the concept of all these different sexualities. So we're gonna have to express that with characters. But being that I am heterosexual myself, I'm like, didn't put that as the main characters just because I was like, I don't feel like that's my story to tell. Let's not really. So I was like, okay, I will make them. I will try to populate this world well, and just not give them the point of view because I don't want to take somebody else's voice from that. Who
Yeah. I mean,
because
that's
there's lots of gay and bi and trans authors out there, and they can let them write those stories. Let them
yeah,
get that rep.
yeah, yeah,
So
exactly. Exactly. Well, per usual, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about here. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own stories and thoughts and feelings and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how visions like these have impacted you in your own lives. Special thanks to Brandi for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah. So please comment, like, subscribe below. Check out linktree/clairjoyance for all of my links. And then, Brandi, where can people find out more about you?
So I'll be honest, my social media has been pretty lax lately, so I need to get back on that. But so Facebook, Instagram, and I'm starting a TikTok. And you can find me under the handle Meravarian, so
Mhm.
Meriverian. That's the handle I use for all of my stuff, which seems random. It has to do with the country in my books.
Hmm.
So it does make sense in the context of my author stuff. You can also find me at brandispencer.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure those links are available for easy access. And until next time, please remember that you have extraordinary stories to share, and we're rooting for you as you use them to change the world for the better. Take care, everyone. Oh, I'm on a different computer, so I don't know how to do this. Here we go.